host this evening. I'm also joined by Lena Eberhardt, who is the CEO of Let's Get Ready, and Grace Bianchardi, who serves as the Managing Director of Program Design. So before we get started, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and my background and my long history with Let's Get Ready. So I was first introduced to Let's Get Ready as a student in New York City. And with their support, I was able to improve my SAT scores. And I also got some college counseling support. And I was the first in my family to go to college, and I was able to attend and graduate from Babson College. So thank you to Let's Get Ready for all of their support. So because of that, during the summers while I was in college, I would also go back to Let's Get Ready to serve as an SAT prep coach. And I also served as a site director at Hostos Community College in the Bronx. So as you can see, Let's Get Ready supported me a lot throughout the time while I was in college as well, but it also impacted my career. And so I was so inspired by the work that I did with LGR that I went to school to obtain my master's in education from the University of Pennsylvania. And then I followed a career in college access. So I became a manager of college counseling at a Boston public high school. And today I'm working at an edtech startup supporting leaders across school districts in the US and Latin America. And because Let's Get Ready has impacted me in so many ways, I also became the co-founder of the Let's Get Ready New England Associates Council. So I'm super excited to be able to carry on the work that I do with Let's Get Ready. And I'm even more excited to have the opportunity to see you all and talk to you all tonight. So I'll tell you a little bit about how tonight will function. We're going to have about 20 minutes of presentation material this evening from both Lena and Grace, and then we'll open it up for questions. So we've received a few questions through the RSVP form ahead of time, but we'll also encourage you to submit some questions through the chat function, and we'll get to as many as we have time for. So I'd like to now turn it over to Lena for an overview of Let's Get Ready and some of the challenges and opportunities we're preparing for this year.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much, Natasha, for being here and for everything you've done for Let's Get Ready over the years. And thank you all for tuning in. This is such an exciting audience. We have staff, we have students, we have alumni, we have long-term supporters, we have people who are hearing about Let's Get Ready for the first time. We have program partners, so it's really a very diverse audience and touches on so many aspects of Let's Get Ready. So I'm so grateful you all joined in. So I'm Lena Eberhardt. I'm CEO of Let's Get Ready. I've been CEO since March, which, as you can imagine, was crazy timing. Before that, I was the Chief Program Officer at Let's Get Ready for several years and have been working in college access and success in New York City for almost 20 years, first as a college counselor and then moving into nonprofit administration over time. So when I became CEO in March, there were many, many challenges to navigate. Obviously, there was COVID-19. There was a long overdue national reckoning on racial injustice, all in the midst of incredible economic uncertainty and a very divisive election year. So I know we've all been aware of these headlines, as you can see on the slide here, and lots more like this. And concerned about how all of these issues are impacting access to higher education. What I can say is that the logistical and emotional toll has really been substantial at every level of our organization, for our staff, for our partners, for our supporters, and of course for our students and coaches. My responsibility is to all of these stakeholders and to ensure we move forward into this coming year in a way that's financially and operationally sustainable, that has a deep impact for our students, and that really reflects our values, particularly those related to inclusivity, to active work towards becoming a more equitable and anti-racist organization, and advocacy for our students who are first generation to college, who are coming from low-income backgrounds, and who identify as people of color. Tonight, we'll be specifically highlighting the needs of our coaches and students as we focus on our program model and the ways it has been and has potential to even more so be responsive to these issues. So all of the challenges that I just mentioned only clarify the need for continuous quality and adaptive mentoring specifically geared for college success. Fortunately, this has long been at the heart of what we do, and that core is extremely strong. You can see here our program model. So our program operates in 3 phases: access, transition, and success, from 11th grade in high school all the way through to college graduation. The transition and success programs have long been operating virtually and actually were designed to be primarily virtual. So when the pandemic hit, we were able to maintain operations in those phases very seamlessly, just making sure that we adapted the content, which you'll hear more about later. In the Access program, which many of you may be familiar with, is our SAT prep program and sort of an introduction to the college process for 11th graders. That program has traditionally been operating on site in person. So we had to really overnight pivot that program to be fully running virtually, and we're able to run full access programs in the spring and the summer. And you'll hear more about how we did that later. But the other key things I want to point out, and you can see here on the right of the slide, the unique elements of the model, which have really maximized our adaptability and our impact, is we have near peers as the key lever. So in every phase of our program, the program is really led by our near peer mentors. And Natasha mentioned being a coach in our program herself. These are currently enrolled college students who we hire, train, manage, support through the process of becoming really, really successful, impactful mentors for their younger peers. And that has all kinds of amazing impact and leads to all kinds of quality, which Grace will talk more about later, but also means that we're very cost effective. And so we can sort of grow nimbly in that way. Our virtual programs too, and our virtual approach has also allowed us to grow nimbly over time and leads to some geographic diversity. So we're able to work in rural communities, suburban communities, and urban communities. And a couple of other things to mention. One is there's really a low barrier to entry in our program. The important thing is that a student has a college aspiration. So they say, yes, I want to go to college, and that they meet some of our demographic priorities. But there's no academic barrier to entry. There's no nominating process, for example, which is actually quite rare in programs like ours, especially those that start in 11th grade. And lastly, you can see in transition and success here in the model, we have what we call core and core plus. So we've really understood that, one size does not fit all, and students need different levels of support at different phases of their journey. And so based on student choice, based on assessments of risks that we do, and based on the phase that they're in, we really can offer different levels of service depending on the student's needs. So the good news is we know that this is working, and we know this through surveys that we do regularly, through levels of engagement that continue to increase, through retention of our coaches and students, and through completion of interim milestones that we're tracking along the way. But we also know that through tracking our ultimate outcomes, which are college enrollment, college persistence, and college graduation. And you can see here on the graphs here that our students are enrolling, persisting, and graduating at rates well above their peers and also above national averages in each case. These results are, of course, pre-COVID, and our work now is to make sure that we can continue on this trajectory and build on the strengths that we have to ensure the current challenges that students are facing don't reverse years of their efforts in achieving their college goals. And important to mention is that, our students are not unique. We're seeing these challenges across the country, and we're only really at the very beginning of understanding the gravity of these educational disruptions in the long term. We also know these challenges are not equally distributed. Our students are especially at risk because they're members of groups that have been historically underrepresented in higher ed and face systemic barriers at higher rates. For example, very preliminary data from the National Student Clearinghouse shows that enrollment is down by 2.5% overall this fall. And again, this is very preliminary, but the decrease in enrollment for Black students is potentially as high as 11%. So those are things that we're paying very close attention to and know that impact our students in huge ways. So these are the sort of needs at a statistical level. But this slide here shows, what some of our own students have shared about what they need. We did a big survey this summer to ask them, how's it going? What do you need? What's it been like? And the things that jump out to me here are seeing, students are still really committed to their college goals. They're persisting through challenges in major ways. but the challenges are real and they are significant. So there are all the things we'd expect, like difficulty with remote learning, figuring out how to pay for college in an environment where maybe one of their parents, was laid off, or they're sort of feeling more uncertain about their financial future. Safety and health, right, are of course huge concerns right now. But also things like lack of social opportunities. We all know so much a part of college is building a community and having a social experience. And so, the lack of that is really significant in students' experience. And that and all of the other things too can really lead to significant mental health concerns. So this is sort of the context in which we're currently operating and making sure that our program is really responsive to these needs. So driven by these needs, and because of the flexibility and strength of our model, this year, we plan to build on what you can see here as our current footprint. So this shows sort of who we're serving and where. We really want to pursue opportunities to serve more students who need support. And obviously, this has to be done in a way that's very sustainable. But we really want to try to meet what we're seeing is really overwhelming interest from students and partners in receiving these services for their students. And we also want to try to work in more places, even as we continue, of course, to focus on the existing communities we're in and the really strong partnerships we've built over time. But the virtual approach means we've already had opportunities to pilot work in new places. And in general, we're sort of less limited by what were some past operational constraints that were posed by some locations. So for example, we're really looking right now, what does the virtual approach mean for our ability to serve even more students in rural areas? As an example, or in other states where there's a real need. But we want to do all of this in a way that really prioritizes quality, prioritizes impact, and prioritizes our ability to serve students at more depth and at the depth they really require right now, given the context that they're in. And so in our world, that means making sure that all the students who need it or want it can opt into that core plus level of support that I showed on the program model slide. And that we're using data really strategically to identify students who could most benefit from our support. So that's the what and the why of what we're doing and sort of what the year ahead looks like. I'm going to turn this now to Grace, my colleague, the Managing Director of Program Design, who's going to share the nuts and bolts of how we're ensuring our program approach evolves to meet these challenges while, as I say, still prioritizing quality and impact.
Awesome. Thanks, Lena. It's great to be with you. My name is Grace Bianchardi, and I serve as our Managing Director of Program Design. And as my title suggests, I oversee our model design, training, curriculum, and the development of the tools and resources that our coaches and students need to be successful. As Lena shared, when COVID hit this spring, we had to shift our on-site model that we use for our Access program online. But for the most part, the heart of our mentoring program, where we serve most of our students each year, was already set up to support students virtually. So in those first chaotic days as schools and campuses sent students home this spring, we watched as other programs and institutions struggled around us to sort of fundamentally pivot their programs. We felt grateful that our mentors were able to continue to support their mentees, relatively uninterrupted. So they were able to walk alongside as their students were evacuating campus and figuring out together sort of how we're going to get home and where we're going to put our things. They were there for their students a few days later when classes resumed and when students needed so much support to figure out what it meant to be virtual college students or virtual high school seniors. For the next few minutes, I'm going to share how we set our coaches up to be impactful mentors and how we maintain quality as we grow and as the circumstances change around us. So what it takes to ensure that our students have really consistently high quality mentoring in this unique year is essentially the same as what it's always taken. We focus on having incredible coaches, some of whom are here tonight, comprehensive and accessible tools and resources that support high quality mentoring, which I'll show you some of, and quality data collection and practices that make sure that we're monitoring how we're doing. And really, as Lena said earlier, identifying students that need more support and being able to provide those targeted interventions. I'm going to start with coaches. So our first focus is on hiring incredibly empathic, experienced college students to serve as mentors. So we have an incredibly competitive pipeline of coach applicants. It's the job that students want. It's a job that's flexible, can be done from wherever they are. And that allows us to be really selective and to identify the students who we think are most able to translate their experiences and motivate their mentees. They're the most eager and the most persistent in their outreach to engage their students. And so we take those sort of core skills and competencies, and then we train them with a set of critical relationship building and advising skills that they need to respond to the really specific and wide range of questions that come up, and the kinds of challenges that they're going to need to guide their students through. Both the challenges we know about, and because it's 2020 and I think 2021, all the challenges that are going to come up that we can't even anticipate. It is critically important to us in our hiring process and our practices that our students see themselves in the mentors they're assigned to. You know, that they witness in their mentors a college student who might be, you know, like them, who has, you know, made it, a mentor who might have traveled a similar path, who might have faced similar challenges, similar experiences, come from a similar high school, and may have some of the same doubts that they had. Representation has the power to change the way our students see themselves and their belief that they belong in college. And because of that, we work incredibly hard to make sure that whenever possible, our coaches are alumni of our program, or can speak from the experiences our students have had firsthand. And the last statistic here sort of reflects our focus on retention. So many of the students this past spring, many of those coach and student relationships and pairs who are working together in those first days of the pandemic and throughout the spring semester, those coaches are returning to work with us this fall. And that means they're picking up those conversations and those relationships with those same students and deepening those relationships so that they can be there to support them this fall as new challenges come up. I think above all else, the thing that matters the most in many ways and has such an incredible impact on our students is that 100% of our coaches have been through what their mentees have been through and are currently navigating this like crazy and unprecedented moment alongside them, right? In a way that many of us as adults and certainly adult mentors don't know what it's like to be a college student on campus right now navigating a pandemic, but our near peers do. And as one of our college success coaches, Semhar, shared with us recently, something she really appreciates being a near peer mentor is that she can give advice to her students who are in a position that she was in a few years ago. She said, there were certain topics that students don't think about until I mention it. I'm able to build relationships with students where they felt comfortable telling me how things are going without me having to force it out of them. I think a lot of them grew as students and as individuals, and that allowed me to do that as well. The second element that I think is incredibly important in making sure that our students are getting really high quality and consistent and impactful mentoring is to make sure that the tools and resources that our coaches are using to guide their work are comprehensive and easy to access. And that in this moment, as students are doing everything virtually and our program is 100% virtual, that those materials are available and accessible virtual, both those that always were, that were built to be virtual, and those like the Access materials and Access program that we've had to put up into an online space pretty quickly. So coaches from each phase of our program have always had access to an online resource library that's stocked with a wealth of resources specific to the phase that their students in. These resources are aligned to whatever critical enrollment or persistence milestones students are working towards. So over the past few weeks, our Transition Core Plus coaches, this is their resource library, have been working on academic, making sure that students' lists are incredibly robust, that they're academically balanced, that students are considering financial fit, that students are considering their own personal fit factors. And so you'll see that the resource library resources give coaches prompts that they can be asking and vetted resources and tip sheets, both those that we've made organizationally and those that we source from our partners. So those are the materials that our coaches have always needed and have always been available. you'll see here that we also have been working hard to make sure that our coaches have the kinds of resources they need right now around navigating the college application process and decision-making process in light of COVID. So, you know, how do I visit campus and make that decision virtually? What kinds of events can I be going to? How do I make sure I'm incredibly successful as a senior, as a remote learner, and have an incredibly successful final year? And then more specific, so students who are having housing or food insecurity, and then sort of regional resources as well, just to make sure that our coaches have what they need to help their students navigate this incredibly challenging moment. So again, both resources we've always had for coaches, and then making sure that we are, you know, keeping updated new resources that are responsive to this moment. And I think, you know, I think in addition to this, something we're working on right now is just making sure that we're creating new resources that are connected to the things that our students are thinking about, like the impact of the Black Lives Matter protests on college culture, or how to navigate this really high stakes emotional election moment on campus. So those are resources that are sort of in the works that we're working on. As I mentioned, our Access program was not virtual before COVID. This was an on-site program, as Lena mentioned, and that means that, you know, lots of the people on this call, they've got like their coach manual or their student manual from their time in an LGR classroom, and that's where our curriculum was. As we had to pivot quickly this spring to make sure our students still had access to the support they needed for the SAT, we partnered with a great platform to create some on-demand videos of lessons led by coaches, where students could actually watch the videos within the platform and get the support they needed, ask questions directly on the platform. And then we took our full curriculum and uploaded it to the site. So students could actually do the problems from the manual, from the curriculum directly on the site, get solutions and answers to their question right there. And then you can see here, there's even a help box where they can communicate directly to their coach and get a specific answer or support around a specific problem if they're confused. So those resources, both the existing ones and the ones that we're pivoting quickly to make sure are available to our students, that's sort of a critical lever in making sure that our coaches have what they need and that our program is really consistent and high quality. Lastly, I want to talk about data. So our coaches have always collected data about their students and how they're progressing to help them, you know, be able to tailor their support and flag students who needed more. But as our programs have moved entirely virtual, that data becomes an especially critical window into how our students are doing and which students might need additional support. So for example, paying attention to how often is a student engaging with their coach? Are they on track with the college essay? Have they cleared their fall semester balance so they can register for classes? By assessing these different milestones and gathering these different pieces of data, our coaches sort of use their conversation to sort of collect all of that and then prioritize students on their caseload based on, you know, whatever missing or concerning data. So they sort of gather this information. They then meet with one of our amazing full-time program managers who serve as their supervisors. And then they work together to say, you know, who are we most concerned about and what kind of tailored intervention might they need in this moment? And that's obviously always been a part of our program, but it becomes especially important when we're not sitting in front of a student. And then Lena mentioned we're also using data in new ways to be really strategic in our recruitment process. So to use information about students, either their risk factors, their SAT score, whatever that might be, to identify students who might benefit from more comprehensive support, and then really work to encourage them to get that support and sort of sign up for our opt-in to our next level up of support, that sort of Core Plus program that Lena mentioned. Last but not least, as we move from this moment of incredible instability in higher ed, in our communities and our homes, into this next year where there are so many unknowns and so many questions, our program team is laser focused on 4 things. So first, connecting back to what Lena shared, this year is an opportunity for us to make sure that our students have access to this program, that geography is not a barrier in the ways that it might have been in the past, and that the students who need deeper support get it. Second, we've always relied on incredible partnerships to connect us to students and communities. And this year, those partnerships are going to be as important as ever. So that's a big focus of ours this year, be really strategic in those partnerships. Third, in this moment of instability, we will continue to strengthen sort of our core resources and model, as I shared, but we are going to push ourselves to listen to the needs of our students, our coaches, and our partners in new ways. We need to anticipate their needs, and we need to make sure that our program is as relevant for our population of students and their shifting needs as is humanly possible. And last but not least, we are focused on proactively looking for opportunities to share what we have learned about the power of near-peer mentoring as a successful intervention. We are going to actively seek ways to share what's worked and what hasn't worked with our peers who are out there trying to figure out how to implement mentoring programs for the first time. And we are going to actively join into the conversations that are happening all around us in the higher ed space around the role of standardized testing, the role of equity, and how to unleash the sort of power of young people as problem solvers around college access and success. We are going to force ourselves to sort of tell that story. So none of us can predict what this year will bring, but our incredible team, our near-peer coaches, and our students are off to a great start already. And I'm incredibly hopeful that our students are going to be able to continue towards their goals in as an uninterrupted a way as possible. So I will pass it back to you all for Q&A.
Thank you so much, Lena and Grace, for those updates. So now we're going to go to some questions. So as a reminder, if you have any questions, you can submit them through the chat function. I think we have some questions already. So this first one is a two-part question. How is the uncertainty of the future of the SAT impacting your programs? And how is LGR supporting students as they navigate changing college admissions requirements around standardized testing?
I can jump in first, and then Grace, you tag in. I think, just for those who maybe don't know, there has been a lot of changes with the SAT and the role it plays in college admissions. So I think, the SAT itself has, long been on some level a controversial test, as has many standardized tests. And the SAT in particular has, people have felt differently about it over the years. What's more current right this minute is that more and more colleges, I think it's up to 1,600 universities or something like that, have decided to make the SATs an optional part of an admissions process as opposed to required. And there's actually a growing number of colleges that are even saying that they're going to be test blind, which means they won't even look at the test, even if the student offers it as part of their application. So that obviously has big implications for our work as an organization. But I think, so I would say sort of our response is twofold. One is a student-centered response, which is, okay, this is the landscape that we're now operating in terms of college admissions. If it is optional, should you do it? What role does the SAT play for you as an individual student? How does it augment your particular profile, given your college list and what you're interested in, sort of where does it fit in? So I think, that's really important sort of on an individual coaching level. I also think that we're still in the markets we're working in, most Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Maine, the SAT is still quite central, and it's even being used for other purposes. So it's used for general college readiness measures. It's used to test out of remedial classes. It might be used for certain scholarships or for certain opportunity programs. So even if you don't need it for admissions, students generally would need a lot of guidance around like what role might it play, and what are the other opportunities that it might open up for me. But on an organizational level, of course, we have to think about this in the long term. I do think in the near term, and certainly the long term, I think the role of the SAT will change, and I think the role of the College Board will change, and so we have to change along with it. And you'll see from our program model, we really have already diversified our portfolio, if you will. The Access program is a core part of who we are. It's an extremely attractive thing for students and partners, and remains so. But it's becoming, sort of it's one of many touch points that we have with students, and one of many, many interventions that we're really focused on. So I think from that point of view, we're sort of focused on making sure we can keep offering it to all the partners and students who want it, but also aren't so dependent on that as our sort of core offering and our core brand. Grace, is there anything you'd add to that?
I think those are all the right points. And I would just add that as long as there is a test, which it seems like there is going to be for the foreseeable future, there are going to be students that need support and are going to be looking for help to get ready. And we saw already this summer where, the spring was really challenging for the College Board in terms of administering tests. And even this summer, we had more students than we could even serve, right? Who were interested in getting SAT support. So there is hunger still, and as long as there's hunger for support, then we can continue to offer it. And then, as Lena said, we'll continue to listen and pivot as need be as we learn more about what the plan is from the College Board.
Thank you for that. We have another two-part question for you. So how are you pursuing and choosing program partners at this moment? And is there more demand from potential partners serving high school students or college students, or is it equal?
I think we actually have done quite a bit of work in the last, I'd say, year, but certainly, maybe really a couple of years to really define what we mean by a high quality partnership. And that's as much about the partner as it is about us, right? There's a sort of mutual accountability that we have with our partners. We have to, up our game around sharing data and being really responsive and vice versa, right? And so finding partners that are interested in that level of collaboration, that level of integration, and sort of feeling a sense of shared accountability about goals and outcomes, I think is really key. I think for us too, looking for partners who are thinking about student services at a similar sort of continuum and scale. So seeing sort of the trajectory of needs, students, we have partners in the high school space who are, know that they want to hand off their students to a really, sort of trusted collaborator when they get to the end of their program. And so, finding partners for whom that sort of handoff really feels really seamless. And we're very mission aligned and sort of values aligned. So from a student perspective, it can feel really seamless and continuous. The second part of that question, I'd be interested, Grace, if you have a thought about it. I mean, I think high school partners have typically been our bread and butter and have been really interested because they're interested in sort of coming into the access side. So actually finding college partnerships is a newer part of our work. So I think we still have more high school partners, but I think we've really sort of exponentially grown in terms of the college partnerships that we're developing. But Grace, would you have a?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think the only thing I would add is that we're seeing out there incredible demand from colleges, both community colleges as well as, four-year private institutions or large universities that are working really hard right now to try to figure out how to provide the kind of enrollment support and persistence and graduation support to their students where they don't have those programs currently. And they're scrambling to try to sort of okay, let's text our students, let's figure that out, right? And they're being incredibly scrappy and they're using their resources, but they're sort of starting something from scratch. And I think in a lot of the conversations we're having, there's hunger for this is a tested, tried and true model where we are leveraging a resource they have in abundance, which is college students on their campus, to then work to support students who are earlier along in their career. And that's an incredible narrative and an incredible pool of resources and a way to support their upper class students. And so I think there's real opportunity there as colleges are hungrily looking for ways to support their students. And that's, I think, part of our partnership work is to connect with those schools and be able to offer this model to them.
Sorry, I forgot I was on mute. That's like the story of our lives now. Are you on mute? You're on mute. So we have another question from the audience here. Can you talk about any expansion plans? What new areas are you looking at? We have someone who wants to know specifically if you're looking to expand to Vermont.
Now I'm on mute. Well, we actually have worked in Vermont a fair amount historically, but that's one of the places actually where we had to make a strategic decision at some point to not work in Vermont anymore because the operational and kind of physical constraints were such that our program just operationally couldn't really work there at a cost-effective way. So Vermont's actually one of the places that we're saying now we actually have a new way to go back to those partners and say, hey, we can work together in a new way. And there's certainly plenty of need there. And we had no other reason to not be there anymore except for logistics. So now that that's been removed, I actually think Vermont is a really interesting place for us to explore. In terms of where else, I mean, I can say, we recently, through an investment from the Dell Foundation, worked with partners to add very quickly 1,200 new students to our virtual success program. So these were rising first-year college students. And through that, we reached out very widely to partners to see if they had an interest in need in working together. And this is the first time, therefore, because of some interesting partnerships that came through. We have students who are in Texas and we have students who are in California. Small groups and small little cohorts, but this is an important sort of pilot for us to test, what geographies do make the most sense for us, what level of sort of differentiation is required, and how to proceed. So I think we're going to learn a lot on the sort of communities we're already starting to work with that are outside of our typical regions, and we'll learn a lot from that. I also think that, we have a Boston office and a New York office. We operate out of Mid-Atlantic and New England, we call it, but there's a lot of Mid-Atlantic we still, could work with, and there's a lot of New England that we could still work with. So I think we're also really focused on how do we really, take this opportunity to look at partners who are working. There's partners who serve students all over New England, and that would be a great partner for us, for example. So thinking about it from that perspective.
The only thing I would add that may not be obvious to folks who are newer to our model is that in our transition and success programs, the relationship between the coach and the students, they're geographically agnostic, right? So a coach from New England can be working with a caseload of students from all over, as they're in their senior year. And you saw in our resources, we're working very hard to provide regionally specific resources so that coach has what they need to talk about the TAP process, right? Or to speak specifically about, with a level of expertise about schools in Maine or whatever that might be. And the same is true for our success mentors. So some of our success students go to the same college as their success coach, and some of them don't. And the truth is that our coaches and our students tell us that that's okay, and it works out. And the things that they need to talk about are generally the same sort of regardless of where they go to school. And so I think the way the model is structured makes it particularly possible for us to kind of continue to serve students and partners where the needs are, because the program doesn't have to sort of function in a geographically sort of rigid way. So I just think that's a piece to add as well.
We have a question that follows up on expansion plans and new markets. So now that all programs are virtual, are you able to support students who don't have access to the necessary technology?
So I'm happy to start. I think this is really, really important and incredibly important when we think about working from our values. So one of the things that's amazing about our access programs is, kids just have to show up.
I think we lost. Should I jump in? I think we might have lost Grace.
Sure.
So I think I know what Grace was going to say. Usually we're on the same page.
Sorry, guys. Go ahead, Lena.
So yeah, I mean, in Access, what's been great is students just need to show up at a place that they're accustomed to showing up, their high school, gym, or their, sort of community-based organization that they're already an integrated part of. And we just give them the manual, and then they have everything they need. So it has been a new challenge on the Access side to think about, the technology divide and seeing the places, the geographies that have less access to broadband, for example, or where students do have less access to hardware. And so that's something that we've been looking at for the first time on our application for the program. Tell us what your situation is. There's no barrier, but following up with those students individually to sort of troubleshoot and see what kinds of resources are in their network. The transition and success programs, really a student needs a phone. And other than that, they're really all set, which isn't a given, but it's much more common. And so, but we're accustomed to having to sort of troubleshoot that issue with students, pivot to email, for example, if necessary. But in the Access program, we are sort of seeing, we've really been able to troubleshoot on a case-by-case basis so far, because students often do have sort of resources in their network that we can help, get them connected to. But it's definitely something we're thinking about. Sorry, Grace, now you're back.
No, thanks, Lena, you covered it. Thanks.
Awesome, thank you. So the next question is, can you talk about organizational capacity from a mentor and administration standpoint? Is Let's Get Ready serving the same number of students it was serving prior to the pandemic, more or less?
I think we're serving really the exact same amount. And that's because we added some students on the success side. As I mentioned, we got, sort of one of our funding partners recognized there was a huge need around students who were trying to sort of enroll and matriculate in college this fall. And so we, added a bunch of students in the success program, which made up for the fact that we had a slight decrease in our Access enrollments over the last year. And so I think in the end, it's really pretty flat, sort of just over 13,000 students annually is where we are now. Yeah.
Thank you. How does Let's Get Ready identify near peer mentors, and how do you find the students who need your services?
Grace, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. So partnerships are key to both of those recruitment processes. So our regional leaders and regional teams have incredible and long-standing relationships in each of our regions to sort of be able to source both college students to be mentors and then also to be able to source students that need our services the most. So really aligning with districts and other nonprofit organizations that are serving students that have similar needs to the students that we're looking to serve, and being able to partner, and have them become sort of referral partners for us, and be able to identify students that are first generation to college, or who come from a low income background and who might benefit from this additional support. So I think those are two sort of the sort of partnership element plays a huge role in both of those recruitment processes.
Thank you. This next one says, besides navigating the typical financial avenues, how do you support students as they wrestle with affordability?
I would say, and this is definitely sort of a collaborative question, I think if this goes to a lot of that fit factors that Grace talked about. So it's having that discussion even in the beginning when you're deciding, what is my college list? What are the things I need to be really aware of and really conscious of? What is my situation? Sort of what is likely to be possible, and really having that be a just very transparent, very frank conversation as part of setting that initial list. Natasha, I'm actually sure you have lots of great thoughts about this too, having been a college counselor. And then I think, it is all the traditional avenues, but then I think, there's a lot of scholarships out there. There's a lot of scholarships people don't know about. There's, funding opportunities, not enough, but for undocumented students, for example, that they may not be aware of and that we can help point them to. So I think that, it's really about sort of doing an individual assessment, getting that sort of initial list and the fit right, and then also just sort of broadening a student's, horizons around what might be out there and sort of how much to put themselves out there around that process.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add is I think you're totally right, Lena, starting early. A lot of our students are really afraid of the financial piece of college. And so they're avoiding a lot of the questions and the thinking. And so really making sure that that's considering financial feasibility is part of the very beginnings of their work of building their list. And then that it is a proactive conversation that coaches are having with their students all throughout, whether the student wants to or not. The coach is saying, all right, now you're starting to hear back from schools. Let's look at your award letters. Let's compare them side by side. Let's really understand what it means to accept this offer over this offer. Now we're in the decision-making phase. Let's talk about loans. Let's talk about that gap. There's like that proactive work that coaches do to make sure that students are sort of facing this part so that they don't get themselves all the way to the end. And that first bill comes in the summer before they start school and they freak out, right? And so I think that's a big piece of it, is that sort of proactive, like kind of pushing themselves into students' space to make sure that they're really thinking about this and thinking this through. And I think just being really, our coaches are trained to listen very carefully for concerns that might come up at different points in the process. So as students have questions, as students get overwhelmed with the FAFSA process, or that our coaches are sort of hearing that early and then moving students towards sort of a next step around it. Let's figure out what that next step is, because I think a lot of the issues that students face around the financial aspect of college oftentimes starts in these early stages where they're avoiding something, or they get freaked out, or they get stuck and they don't move something forward, and then they sort of miss opportunities. And so I think that's a big part of what our coaches are able to do. But this is a huge challenge for our students, and increasingly so, given all the economic concerns that families are facing with COVID. This is a big part of the work that our coaches are doing with their students.
Grace, you just said almost everything of what I was going to say, but I definitely agree that having these conversations early on is super important. I think the other piece of the financial aid process is that it can be very confusing for students. And a lot of times students will get an email and they're confused by the language, so they won't respond to it. And that just completely messes up their entire financial aid process. And so I think having like a coach there and someone who's able to support them and walk them through those steps just allows them to be a little bit more transparent and to really understand, how much am I going to be paying for college? Like, what does this all mean? And how do I even go through this process? So it's really important to have someone there to be able to support students through those moments.
Absolutely.
So I have another question that goes back to test prep. Do you provide support for other admission tests, such as the ACT, if students choose a school that requires a test other than the SAT?
The shorter answer is no, we don't. That's been an ongoing question for the organization for a long time, I think. Obviously the ACT for a long time was thought of as the test that was in the Midwest, so it maybe wasn't as relevant to our regions, but that's changed over time, and a lot more students are interested in taking the ACT. So it's something that certainly is on the docket to consider. I think that is a massive sort of investment of time, energy, expertise. There's a whole sort of things that would require. So my preference would be to find amazing experts who are doing great ACT prep and really collaborate with them, in a really integrated way, so we can benefit from that expertise and not necessarily have to reinvent the wheel.
Thank you. So I have one more question. What kind of support has Let's Get Ready received from its board in order to adapt and collaborate in your efforts as you adapted to serving students remotely?
Well, we actually have quite a few board members on the call, so this gives me a good opportunity to publicly thank them. I mean, the board has been incredible to bring on a new CEO in the middle of a pandemic and have to pivot a, in-person gala event to a virtual campaign overnight, and still sort of, bring so much support provide so much support for the staff and for the organization, I think has really been incredible. I think the board also is really, there's members of the program committee on this call, for example, and I think, you know, in terms of the specific sort of focus of this presentation, you know, having a touch point and sort of a sounding board for some of these things that we're thinking about, you know, bringing on more virtual success students, you know, the decrease, you know, the brief decrease in access, but thinking about sort of how are we looking at impact this year? How are we all going to hold ourselves accountable and stay aligned? And what does it mean to be successful in this new world with these new ways? To have, you know, experts in the field and people who really love Let's Get Ready, but aren't in the weeds every day, this kind of, you know, help us pull back, look at a high level, ask the right questions, I think has been totally invaluable.
I'd add that some are in the weeds every day, like Pat McQuaid, who've given real insight there too.
Yep.
So I know I said that was the last question, but we have one more. How are you substituting for the college visit aspect of the Access program, where students have had firsthand experience to tour college campus, talk to administrators and students, to ask questions to determine comfort level and student fit?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this. So this is a great question. I think in some ways there's some real loss for students around not being able to walk around a college campus and start to see themselves there and establish that, you know, sense of belonging and sort of comfort with the process. You know, whether it's the school they end up applying to or not. I think college tours are incredibly important. And I think all college students are going to miss them this year because so few schools are welcoming students onto campus for tours. I think so that's the downside. I think the upside is that colleges have pivoted incredibly quickly to provide virtual experiences for students, tours and really sort of meaningful connections, you know, making their students and faculty available to students who are considering their school for conversation and for learning and for assessing their own fit and getting a sense of whether that culture matches their needs. And so I think it's both a downside and also like an incredible opportunity. Students can go to lots of these different virtual tours and learn, you know, a lot about a lot of different schools that they might not have been able to travel to before. You know, our students in the past have struggled because a lot of times they're applying to schools that they can't get themselves to for a tour. So I think making sure that our students know about those virtual opportunities, we're actually in the process of building out a page on the resource library to make sure that our coaches know how to direct students to all the different tour opportunities that there are. But I think right now, making sure that students are connected to a mentor who can talk about the college process generally and their experiences generally, and then making sure students are taking advantage of those college tours virtually.
And we have had, the only thing I'd add is we've had some members of our Associates Council and some other partners as well, who in the spring volunteered to sort of be paired up. So if there was a student that was particularly interested in a college and we happened to have an alumni on our Associates Council or any of our other sort of governance bodies, you know, they could have a sort of one-on-one. So it's not the same as a tour, but sort of a personal reflection on what it was like to go to that college and, you know, sort of get some of that as a substitute.
Forgot about that. That was great too.
Great, thank you. So I think that's all the time we have for tonight. So we really want to thank everyone for joining us. We hope that you found this helpful and informative and that you're walking away with a better understanding of our programs and how we're serving and supporting our students. So before we go, I want to turn it over to Allison, our National Director of Development, for a quick announcement.
Thanks, Natasha, and thank you, Grace and Lena, and for everyone joining us this evening. I think this was a really informative presentation, and hopefully you are walking away with a lot more information about what's going on at Let's Get Ready, but I know a lot of people really want to hear from students. So we have a great event coming up on October 26th that we hope you save the date for, a study break for you to put down everything else that's going on in your life and tune in for about half an hour to hear directly from our students and coaches about what college is like right now and what they're dealing with and how Let's Get Ready is supporting them directly. So hope you'll join us again for that. And thank you again for tuning in this evening. We will share this presentation, which has been recorded, as well as the slides in a follow-up later this week. So thanks again for your time and have a great evening.
Thank you.